When will the government decide that they're spending enough of our money? Many Idahoans are familiar with the kitchen table economics of prioritizing your needs above your wants. In fact, this is how most families decide how to budget for their needs. But the government is different. Being that they are generally charged with spending other people's money, it's not surprising that the state rarely adheres to this rule for wise budgeting, and Governor Little's spending habits are no exception. In week 5 of presentations before the Joint Finance Appropriations Committee, it was apparent that many of these agencies are looking for ways to spend the surplus of tax revenue to clean out their wish lists rather than sincerely address their needs. Of the presentations seen this week, the Secretary of State was the most egregious example of this exorbitant spending. Newly elected Secretary of State Phil McGrain started with a proposal for a $10 million supplemental to replace the state's election data system. Keep in mind that this would replace an existing system that is so new it hasn't even been fully implemented. The purchase of the current election system, known as 10X, was authorized by the legislature in the 2019 fiscal year. At that time, the legislature appropriated $1.2 million for the program, with the plan being that subsequent spending would come from the maintenance costs supporting the old program 10X was supposed to replace. Today, Idaho is $3.8 million in the hole with 10X, and legislators, counties, and the Secretary of State's office are all complaining about the poor functionality of the program. Secretary McGrain wants to end the 10X contract and purchase not one new program, but several new software programs to do the same jobs that 10X currently services. All of this at more than 2.5 times the cost and more than 120% of his current budget. The Secretary of State would also like to substantially grow the size of his office. He is making a rash of hires for many tasks that could and should be allocated for by his big-ticket software spending like elections management, or by making simple adjustments to office policies like opening during lunch. Like other big government bureaucrats, Secretary McGrain wants to delegate his responsibility as a member of the Land Board, hire at least 3 new positions to oversee the new election system, hire an executive assistant, growing agency overhead, and to create 3 new positions to manage the different data systems he would create by replacing 10X. These asks go beyond bad budgeting and tend toward a lack of efficient management that will cost Idaho taxpayers millions in the coming years. As part of the governor's initiatives to combat the fentanyl epidemic in Idaho, he is asking for a $6.4 million supplemental to be given to ISP for officer safety equipment and education resources. This ask is in conjunction with a line item for the upcoming fiscal year of $1.6 million to add 12 full-time equivalent positions to the agency. The problem with the governor's initiative is not only that it is an unlegislated effort, but it hides most of the spending in the supplemental request as an attempt to balance his initiatives with the appearance of small budget growth. The agency is also requesting $426,000 in replacement items and equipment, citing supply chain backups as the key factor for why this supplemental is necessary in the 2023 fiscal year rather than in the 2024 maintenance budget. However, the agency is requesting carryover authority for these funds, indicating that it is unlikely that they will be able to expend these funds before the start of next fiscal year anyway. Lastly, we turn to the Department of Juvenile Corrections, who has habitually requested supplementals for the creation of youth assessment centers. Both of these supplementals were recommended by the governor and did not come from the creation of new legislation. Last year, the IDJC was appropriated a $4.1 million supplemental to give grants for the creation of youth crisis centers. IDJC Director Monty Pro noted in his presentation that there were about $10 million worth of asks in grant applications, warranting the need for another $4.4 million supplemental request for the current fiscal year. The problem with this method of budgeting is that it is funding a new and unlegislated program with subsidies from tax dollars in the general fund. This stifled local investment in these programs. Selecting all applications for grant receipts removes any notion that the selections were made based on merit or their odds of being successful investments. Overall, the chronic nature of these supplemental requests indicate bad budget management on the part of the governor and administrators within the Department of Juvenile Corrections. It would not be surprising if these applicants came back in 2024 to ask for more supplemental spending. To wrap up, Idahoans should be asking when enough is enough. Renowned economist Ludwig von Mises famously noted that there will always be a way for a bureaucrat to justify how receiving more money can improve their agency. Bureaucracies are tied up by the idea that their services provide a public good, while ignoring the fact that there is no better way for a person to better themselves than for them to decide how to spend their own money. Government agencies are not beholden to market forces like you and me. Therefore, the cost-benefit analysis of what would be a worthy investment in a sphere of limited resources is almost non-existent. Government spending will continue to increase, and it will never be enough. Rather than spend the surplus on new government programs, corresponding staff, and growing agencies, Governor Little should return tax dollars to those who actually adhere to kitchen table economics, the taxpayers. For more episodes of Fiscal Fridays, bill analyses, and articles, please visit idahofreedom.org.